So Jake Paul returned to the boxing ring last weekend against Andre August, who had a 10-1 pro boxing record, had won the Golden Gloves. One thing though was that he'd had like 4 years almost in between bouts. I know during COVID it was hard for boxers to get fights. I mean, none of them were getting put on. There was no crowds there, obviously. So in theory, this was a solid test, but a passable one, and one that would look good on his record. And the reason for this now is because Jake Paul apparently wants to genuinely chase a pro boxing world title. Now, as much as a lot of people will say, all right, you're living in dreamland, you're never going to do that, yada, 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 I can't fault the guy for having hopes and dreams. The question is what he's doing really putting him on the path to even get near that, or is it just chat? Because this could be a smokescreen for something else. So I'm going to look into it and see what I make of the whole fight and make of what Jake Paul's doing, and is this the right road for him? When I watched this guy's previous fights, I was fairly impressed. He was a come-forward fighter, puts the pressure on, likes to get people up against the ropes, rough them up, and I thought, this could be a decent test for Jake Paul. And it wasn't. And I don't know why. Was it stage fright? He's not used to this level of crowd, the speculation and attention. Is it just that the ring rust caught up with him and he's just not that good anymore? Or is it because Jake Paul is actually better than people give him credit for? Maybe a little of all of that. Interesting to see Jake Paul doing a KSI style stance. He came in at 199 pounds in this fight, which is much heavier than we'd previously seen him against Tommy Fury. I think Tommy Fury came in at like 183 and a bit. A significant weight gain, and for me, I was immediately like, all right, we're going for the knockout then. You're packing on the size for the power, and you want to get this guy out of there quickly, and for whatever his coaches have seen, they're confident they're going to do that. He just doesn't look like he wants to even throw Andre August. Yeah, it was a poor showing, but one thing that he did do there was that overhand right hand. And the reason this is quite interesting, for one thing, it's quite similar to how Francis Ngannou caught Tyson Fury, because he waited for him to come in, and the minute he felt that touch, he releases the right hand, and he catches Jake Paul with it. Now, Jake took it really well, to be fair, but a lot of people are going to point to that and go, that's the shot that KSI likes to throw. And if KSI lands that on you, it may hurt you a lot more than Andre August did. Just saying, it's an interesting moment. That double jab really was authoritative. I like it. And if there's one thing I have been complaining about Jake's style on, is the lack of a jab. It's a little too much of a brawler style and not enough of the boxing fundamentals that I know he's been taught. I mean, BJ Flores will have taught him how to throw a good jab, but it's about refining it and getting to do it in the ring rather than just in training. And now he's actually putting it into his actual boxing here. If he'd done that more against Tommy Fury, even though Tommy has probably a better jab, you could argue, than Jake, it would have made it more closer, more competitive, and actually allowed him to set up the right hand, because he didn't do that enough in that fight. He looks big though. I think 199 is a bit too big for Jake. He looks like he's proper carrying a lot there. So Jake has thrown the jab out, and again, I'm pretty sure August comes over the top with the right hand. Jake misses his right hand. Bang, straight on the chin. So for all August didn't throw that many punches, the couple he did landed really well. And yes, Jake takes them, but that's not the point, is it? You know, you're getting caught, getting greedy, as they say, maybe not being as defensively tight as he could be. And the reason this is interesting is those are KSI's best shots that he's getting caught with, but just without the KSI explosiveness and the power. That doesn't mean KSI's beating Jake Paul. I'm just making the comparison of when KSI hopefully gets in there with Jake, these are things that he wants to be looking at. Oh, beautiful shot. Beautiful shot. Like, I haven't seen this back. I've only seen it the once, and just to see it again fully. Oh wow, he had nailed him. That is a hell of a moment for him. And look, this is partly what this was set up to do, right? This wasn't as much of a learning fight as it's been a while since we've knocked someone out. We need to remind the people of what Jake Paul can do at his best. Let's get a style that matches up well, and let's put a nail in him and remind people who the fuck Jake Paul is. And that picture there is exactly what he's doing. It's good for his confidence, and it's good to stay sharp by keep on having fights and remaining active. That is one of the biggest mistakes many different YouTuber boxers have made. He doesn't see it coming. Because of the placement of the punch that comes before it in the jab, and the way he's totally blocked the vision of Andre, he has no idea that is coming. Jesus wept. My guy. Yeah. So it was the perfect ending, but not the perfect fight. Andre August could have thrown more punches than, 5? But the finish shows Jake Paul is improving. That was a very smart way to set that up, and the execution was spot on. Now, this brings us on to what's next for Jake Paul, because if it's not KSI next, then in my opinion, that fight will never happen. The fans are already drained and bored of the back and forth. Like, honestly, from both guys, people love them, but people are so bored of them talking about each other and never fighting. And it's getting to a point where the interest is waning. Like, the views on the videos about the fight are waning. Like, people are getting to a point of being over it. And that is something you never want to do. You never want to get to a point where the fans, when you finally make the fight, are like, I mean, I was excited 2 years ago, but you want to cash in while the hype is still there. And we're on the tail end of there being any hype left for that fight. The foreplay has just gone on for too long. And I know both men, if they heard that, might not like that because they want to feel in control of their own destiny, but people are just people, and the fans are ultimately the ones that need to be invested in it. And there's just been so much promises, so much talk, and no delivery on the fight. So for all the huge egos that we've got involved here who don't want to give up, an inch to each other, they want to make sure that they get the deal, the contract, and the fight in the way that they want it. They've both got to ask themselves the question of how bad do they really want this? And I'll be honest, both guys have been in positions here where I think at some points Jake Paul's really wanted it, and KSI hasn't wanted it as much because he's been taking a break doing the music, and at points where Jake Paul has wanted to fight other people and KSI has been desperate to make the fight, and both guys have really wanted to make the fight at different points, but it's just never aligned. And the reason why it's got to be now or never, in my opinion, is because timing is everything. And Jake Paul is fresh off of a fight where he looked good, he's sharp, he's fit, and he's ready to go. KSI, fresh off a fight where he looked good, he's sharp, he's fit, and he's ready to go. I think Jake Paul has got completely different aspirations to KSI. He wants to go off and do a long-term boxing career. KSI is motivated by big events, big moments, and beating Jake Paul is part of that motivation to prove he's number one. In the Tommy Fury fight, he proved that he could compete with Jake Paul. He showed that. But we've seen in the past with KSI, he drifts into music, he gets a bit bored of boxing, and while we've got that boxing fire lit in KSI and Jake Paul simultaneously, we need to take advantage of it right now, in my opinion. And KSI, after such a great camp where he was insanely fit against Tommy Fury, hopefully doesn't want to leave it where, I'm just going to get back into old habits, I'm not going to train as hard, I'm not going to be as disciplined, and I'll pick boxing up later on down the road. Like, if he allows himself to do that, the ground Jake Paul will be making up by being dedicated and being focused on just boxing for no other reason that he wants to be a boxer, it could leave KSI at a disadvantage. Right now is a great time for KSI to take this fight, in my opinion, because he looked unbelievable at times in that Tommy Fury fight. And also, they're both coming off the back of great performances. Like, if either guy continues taking hard fights, we continuously run the risk of an Anthony Joshua situation where we took a fight against Andy Ruiz, who was supposed to be a stepping stone before a Wilder or a Fury, and you derail the whole shit. While I understand that both guys want to get the best deal and the best contract and all of that, the more they continuously push people away, the more you're running the risk of just fucking up your money and not maximizing what this event could be. I understand that Jake Paul's team have offered like a winner takes all bet. I don't think that they should consider that. I don't think either guy should be risking so much money when they're putting in so much hard work just to spice up an event. It's spicy enough, bro. We've been waiting for you guys to fight for years. So it feels like the weight is what's going to cause the biggest stumbling block. Now, I know Jake Paul just fought at 199, but as we've said, that was very much a specific weight for a specific reason, for a specific kind of performance. Generally speaking, he's been fighting lower than that. Against Tommy Fury, he fought at 183 pounds. KSI fought at 181 pounds against Tommy Fury. And I think we can all agree Jake and KSI both look good in those fights. So my theory would be, why not just meet in the middle of what you weighed in those fights in 182 pounds? And there you go. And I understand that there's a lot of ego involved and no one wants to give too much ground up. And I understand that KSI is the smaller guy and therefore it's in his interest to get Jake as low as possible. Jake wants to fight probably as high as possible. But that to me seems a fair way of looking at it and going, look, he's both fought around here before. Let's call it smack bang in the middle of those two fights. 182 pounds. Just a suggestion. I'm just trying to help this fucking fight happen. Give us a break. But it's my honest belief that if they don't come to the table now after having successful fights where they both look good at the end of this year. If they don't make it for next fight, early next year, I think we're never seeing it, unfortunately. At that point, I think it's best for us all to just fuck it off and move on, right? Like 50 years from now, when, you know, YouTube boxing has evolved into whatever it looks like, and I'm pretty sure, you know, we'll always have entertainers doing this after we've seen how successful it can be, this would go down in history as, you know, the definitive YouTube boxing fight. And that's a hell of a thing for them to look back on when they're old men and go, look what we did. You know, maybe they're having a beer over it at some point and they've put their differences to one side and go, I'm so glad we did that. Because I can't help but think that both guys will seriously regret this if they never make it happen. So other than the KSI fight, Jake Paul is talking about collecting belts. And he's even mentioned Vidal Riley's name. I mean, I don't know if a journalist suggested it or whatever. You know, fair fucks to Jake. He's fucking brave and he really wants to take this seriously. I think Vidal Riley is a world-class talent who will be a world champion. And I don't see their paths crossing. I just think Vidal is on a whole nother trajectory. But the fact that he's even saying that, fair fucks, right? You're brave. If he really wants to get serious about this world title chat, it needs to be consistently fighting, you know, these kind of boxers and incrementally making it harder and harder and harder and having as many boxing fights as possible. What really does not align with that chat is talking about having an MMA fight. Jake Paul is already behind the competition because he started late. So what you need to be doing is absolutely eat, sleep, and shit boxing, and you need to have as many boxing matches as humanly possible. Training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kicking, and wrestling should not even be coming into the equation if he is serious about this world title stuff. That's where I'm confused. It makes no sense. That's not me saying I'm shutting down the idea of Jake Paul fighting MMA, because I think a world title for Jake Paul in the PFL, for example, not the UFC, different level, but still, a world title's a world title, is more likely to happen for Jake Paul in MMA than boxing. Now, some of you might think I'm talking shit because we've never even seen Jake Paul fight MMA. One of the greatest fighters in MMA history agrees with me, and that's Mighty Mouse. I'm talking about Demetrius Johnson here, who's had 25 wins in 30 MMA fights and has won every belt worth winning in MMA and is a genius, right? And his point was, boxers have such a limited amount to worry about that the level you can get to in boxing in terms of tightening up all your weaknesses and advancing your skills from learning from being 6 years old, like Vidal Riley did, is a seriously elite level. And you know, learning that later on, you're just never going to be able to make up that ground. But he said, and I agree with this, that in MMA, the skill sets are so broad and vast that what that does is that leaves holes in everybody's game. Everyone has weaknesses in a way that you just don't see in boxing because it is a limited skill set. And with Jake Paul's hands and with his wrestling background from, you know, high school wrestling and the fact that he can pay for the best coaches money can buy, there is a possibility, and for me a stronger possibility, that he could win a world title in a PFL organization than in a boxing organization. So maybe that is something that he should be considering, because I do think that boxing is the harder route to win a world title. You've got people like Chris Eubank Jr., who's been in the game from being a kid, who couldn't pick a world title up. And then you've got Brock Lesnar, who won a world title in 5 fucking fights. That would never happen in boxing. You know, the evidence is there to what I'm saying is true. If the only goal for Jake Paul is to say, I am a world champion, I think that MMA is actually an easier route for him than boxing. But we'll see what happens. For me, if I was him, I'd do the KSI fight and then transition full-time to MMA and fuck boxing off. Because I think that with the PFL, with the fact that he's a part owner of that company, he could really do a lot for that company, but also for himself. And I think that ultimately his ceiling as a boxer, I'm unsure of, but against Nate Diaz, against Tommy Fury, I think we got an idea of, you've gone a very far way from the kid that we've seen against Deji in his first fight, but you're hitting those stale patches where it's really hard to break through that ceiling, and then putting him in an MMA cage with the hands that he has got. Some of these motherfuckers would be devastated by the kinds of punches Jake Paul throws. So, especially with them 4-ounce gloves on, he could do serious damage in MMA, in my opinion. But, you know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I am open-minded, and I do admire the guy's determination and grit to pursue boxing. But I do think he needs to pick a lane and stay in it, because that way you can maximize what you're capable of achieving. And that's just basic, isn't it? So let me know what you think in the comments below. Will the KSI fight happen? What direction will Jake Paul eventually take? And how far will he go in it? Let us know. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.